Cool. So everyone can see my screen? Awesome. So I think we were on. Yeah, so we finished 18, where we were talking about Samadhi, and which basically means where the mind has sort of disappeared for some amount of time. It's an experience, just like anything else. It's not something that is this samadhi that they're talking about is an experience that happens at some time where all of the sort of involvement of the mind on all the stuff is gone, and for a moment only pure awareness remains. And in these moments we have a pure experience of the I, unhindered, untouched, or untarnished with any object. So there's no object available, yet the I is completely perceptible by the mind, because the mind is not holding on to anything, and there is no other object other than I for the mind to perceive. So that's the samadhi that happens. So moving on, continuing, let's do verse 19, or sorry, Sutra 19. Bhava patrayayo videha prakriti layanam. So this samadhi, when not followed by extreme non-attachment, becomes the cause of the remanifestation of the gods and of those that become merged in nature. So here we're given an interesting idea about, firstly, we're introducing this idea of God, which is also kind of a inflated and overloaded word. And then, even a person, so they're basically talking about, if we experience this state, and if we have this experience of samadhi, and if we become attached to this experience, we are sort of going, and that person is not a perfect, hasn't reached the perfect state, which is they're still caught up in experiences, and they're still caught up in the world, and they're going to still be seeking these experiences, and they will come back and yet not be fully free, even though they have experienced this pure awareness. Uh, but the attachment to this state itself becomes another barrier to liberation. So we kind of have to even let go of this, I would say, wanting to get to this place over and over again, because the desire itself becomes an impediment. And here we're given this idea of like a god. So one thing that Raja Yoga, or like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is slightly different from some of the work that we have done with with Karma Yoga and with the Vedanta, they slightly differ in the fact that Raja Yoga kind of talks a lot about the powers that people accumulate as they go down the path of yoga. People start to like develop superhuman abilities of like being able to read other people's minds, and being able to like telepathically communicate with people. All these interesting things happen, and they've been recorded by all the saints and sages of the past. And this is saying that, this is kind of implying that people eventually do acquire these powers. And here, the God here is that kind of a person. So you notice that the G here is with a small letter. So it's like a human God, where this person seems like a supernatural being, right? Like it's like, wow, this person has all these extraordinary abilities. But even if that person is still attached to the samadhi, and still feels very much like a human, they haven't reached the perfect state. So this is saying that the gods that have these abilities may end up in like high stations in society, where they may be rulers of like they may be the prime minister of a country, or like a CEO, and like leading like a lot of like people, because like they have developed this ability to like um, I guess they just have supernatural abilities, so they kind of can work their way up in society. But even those people are not perfect, because they are still attached to the body, and they're still attached to that state, which is still an experience. So this is kind of a warning that, don't get attached to the powers and the benefits that you get by doing yoga. Because in our own lives, we'll start to see that, as we become more and more efficient, life starts to get a little bit easier. We may start to develop a sense of ego because, we may be more efficient in the work that we're doing, and people may see that and recognize us, and maybe, we start to get promoted at work or whatever. So there's all these sort of like egoistic ideas that may come again. And again, what happens is we become merged in nature. So that's kind of what that means, which is we go back and we get involved in the world and get lost in the world again, thinking that that's where happiness is. So this is kind of a warning. Does that make sense? Any thoughts about this? All right, so let's do the next one. Shraddha Virya Smriti Samadhi Pragya Purvak Itaresham. So to others, this samadhi comes through faith, energy, memory, concentration, and discrimination of the real. So here we're given sort of this map or prerequisites that we need to be able to reach this state. And this map may seem a little familiar to the parallels of the Vedanta. So the first one is Shraddha, which means faith. So this is essentially saying that we must have in our minds some sort of belief. I wouldn't say is a right word, but some idea that this path works, right? Like whatever I'm doing, or some sort of trust. I guess trust is a better word. Like I trust that this is going to work and it's going to take me to the final goal, which is fully free from suffering. So that's the faith. And this faith may come because we have some person in our lives which is very inspirational, and we see them and we're like, okay, this person has reached this place, so I have faith that even I will, and I trust this person. So you kind of develop this faith because of it. And this is very important, because if we are constantly doubting whether we are on the right track, whether we are doing the right thing, whether we are progressing along, and whether we are, any new practice that we're given to us, we're very, very like doubtful of its efficacy. If that's like our sort of viewpoint, it's not going to work, because the mind needs to be sort of in a place where it's not really thinking about whether the path is going to work or not. It should be mostly focused on the tools and the practices, and that's where the attention of the mind should be. If it's constantly on this other place where we are doubting things, then the efficacy of the tools is going to be zero. And this can be kind of proven even in the modern sort of like medical world, which is like if a person is sick and a doctor prescribes medicine, but if they're constantly doubting whether the medicine is going to work or not, and if this doctor is skilled or not, it turns out that people end up not getting better because of this mind's ability to suppress or reject any sort of treatment. So the mind has to be aligned with what we're trying to do as well. And maybe Mark can either agree or disagree with that, but since Mark is a doctor, but I have my dad's friend who suffers from this, which is she doesn't believe in any sort of, doesn't trust any doctor. And then I've seen her for the last 20-30 years, just nothing working, no treatment is working because they just doesn't work. And doctors are just dumbfounded of why is this not working? This is supposed to work because it works on everybody else. And the reason I think is because she is just completely mistrustful of everything. So a mind has to be sort of developed that such that it doesn't create its barriers for things, for energy to sort of flow through the body. And then coming to the second point, which is energy. So, we need to put in energy into this work. Without that, it's not going to happen, right? Just like the meditation itself, our natural tendency of the mind is to just kind of get lost and think about stuff and imagine all of our fears, or worry about the future, whatever it is, or plan about a trip that we want to go to. All these things it's doing, and it's doing it unconsciously. And it requires a tremendous amount of energy to bring it back and constantly bringing it back. So, and it's not just like physical energy, it's mental energy that we are kind of like spending to bring it back. So that's like the next thing where we want to put in energy into this work. We want to, every day we must try to spend some time in meditation or whatever other practices that we have, because it requires energy. It's not going to come for free. And it's kind of, and energy here is the currency of this work, right? Like everything has a cost in this world. Nothing comes for free. And the cost here is energy, how much energy we put into the work. And then the next aspect is memory, which is interesting because we are given all these practices, like we go from one course to another course, or like one path to another path, and we're learning all these interesting tools. But what ends up happening is that we don't remember to actually apply the tool when it's needed in our day-to-day interaction. So at work, when somebody yells at us, or maybe not yells at us, but like somebody triggers you for whatever reason, instead of like, using a tool of like maybe letting go or like noticing that the energy or my anger is rising and that's sort of not reacting, instead of using that, we forget. And that's because we haven't really assimilated the tool fully and we haven't integrated it into our lives. So we have to use the right tool at the right time, and that comes with like integration and knowing like what the tool is, how to use it, how does it benefit me, and what is the right time to use the tool. So all of that comes with like playing with the tool and seeing how it works. And a tool that I may use may be very different than a tool that you may use, because we are built differently, and a tool that works for me may not work for you. So we all have to take each tool that we're given and apply it and see which one is the best for me. And that comes with like the scientific way of like using this tool, seeing if it works for me. Did it improve my meditation? Did it reduce it? Whatever, however we want to sort of judge each tool, we want to make our own assumptions and our own conclusions, and that assimilates into our memory, because otherwise we are just using borrowed wisdom. We want to build our own wisdom, and that own wisdom will come with when we use the tools in our own lives. So that builds our memory, and then eventually we want to use all of these tools to build our concentration. And this is very important because our mind by default is extremely dissipated, and we want to concentrate it, sort of reduce the dissipation and have it single pointed attention, our ability to say, I want my mind to focus on this thing and it should obey. If we can get there, liberation is going to be handed to you on a plate. If the mind can follow your will, it'll be handed to you on the plate. But the hardest part is, concentration of the mind. And all of yoga is trying to help us, build this concentration, sharpen the knife that we're going to use to slice open the knots that we have. So that's the concentration that we do. And then finally, it's discrimination of the real. And this is interesting because in yoga, we have this idea of like, what is real and what is unreal. And we are always after what is real. We don't care about what is unreal, even if that means, giving up the greatest wealth that we have, which is like, physical possessions. No, yoga is not interested in any of those things. It's interested only in truth, and they define truth as something that cannot be negated. Something that exists all the time. Any physical object can be negated because, it exists for a time and then it's no longer there, right? You can imagine anything in this world, there's anything physical, it all has a limited amount of time. And if it is limited in time, yoga says it is not real. Only if it is, in fact, if it has never been created or it never destroyed, that's the only thing that's real. And then the question can be then, is there such a thing? Right? That's a pretty valid question too. And yoga says that yes, there is such a thing. Find out what it is. And all we can do is remove everything from our experience which is not real. That's all we can do, because we can never come to what is real by looking for it. We can only remove things that are not real. So that's the entirety of our yoga practice, which is we are not paying attention to things which are temporary. Our thoughts are temporary, so we say, I don't care about my thoughts. Our emotions are temporary. I don't really care about my emotions. My memory is temporary. I don't care about my memory. All of these things are temporary. So when I say I don't care, we're basically saying I don't want to pay attention to it, because I want to pay attention to what is real. And once we remove everything, whatever remains is that which cannot be negated, and that's the I. So the I am meditation is kind of trying to get us there quickly, because it's going directly to the fact that that's the only thing that is true all the time. So all of these things are sequential in a way, right? Like we first have to have faith. That's a prerequisite, because whatever we do, if we don't have that, then half our mind is going to be in doubt, or doubting everything that we get. And once we have this faith, then we sort of say, all right, now I'm going to put in some energy into this. I'm going to try it out. Once I have, once I sort of put in energy, try out these tools, make my own conclusions, then I'm building this memory, my own wisdom. My own wisdom now moves, and I kind of like have that, and my mind gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and now I have this ability to concentrate. Once I have this ability to concentrate, then I can easily focus on the I am, because I am is happening all the time. I can say that yes, from a direct experience, I can say yes, that is the only thing that is not changing. Everything else changes. The I am never changes. So that's the discrimination between the real and the unreal. I is real, everything else is unreal. And once that happens, Samadhi will be handed to you on the plate. So that's the process. Any thoughts about this? Okay, let us do 21. Tivra samveganam asanaha. So success is speedy for the extremely energetic. So this may seem fairly obvious, because if you look at any endeavor in the world, people who are energetic in the endeavor are most likely are the most likely to succeed. So if you look at any successful person, right? Like you look at any sports person, you look at any like business person, you look at any doctor, you look at any singer, all those people have chosen a specific endeavor to kind of put their energies in. And the ones who are going to give it their all in terms of attention and energy, they're the ones who are going to be successful. And the same is true in this work as well. It's like we are all given 24 hours in a day. Nobody is given more than that, right? And then what do we do with those 24 hours? If we spend all of our 24 hours on this work, then it's going to be the fastest that it can. But we can't, right? We have other obligations. But what this is trying to say is that we get what we put in. That's basically it. And we also want to be very efficient in the way we put in our energy. So we want to like get the essence of this teaching and something that is going to work and get me there with, and try to remove all of the extra dross and the unneeded things. So it's important to like find somebody who knows what they're talking about, like finding somebody who's walked the path. All of those things are very necessary if you want to be speedy, because just like anything else, like you want to learn how to play a musical instrument, go to a teacher who knows how to play that instrument. You want to like learn physics, you want to like learn it from somebody who knows, because they have been through it and they can sort of tell you the nitty gritties of things and like the gotchas and all of those things, which will help you, right? Which will help us. So so that's one. So having somebody who knows what they're talking about, but then also from our own experience, we want to like put in as much energy and as much excitement while we're doing the work, because that'll lead to a successful outcome. Any thoughts about this? Okay, next one. Sumridum dhyadhi matra tattvat api visheshaha. The success of yogis differs according as the means they adopt are mild, medium, or intense. So this is interesting, which is um, there are, what is known as sudden methods, and there are what is known as like mild and medium methods. So sudden methods are like, when back in the day, I believe when, the whole ashram life was a lot more prevalent, where people just lived in ashrams for like years. There used to be like situations where like a master would just come in and like, immediately enlighten the student. And that sort of was a is a difficult path, because it requires a lot of preparation. The atmosphere needs to be in such a way that um, the student is kind of like getting nice and ready for that intense experience that the master kind of like does to them. And we don't see that in the modern world today, because the world has just changed too much, where we are not spending as much time and energy on this work, and we need to do that in order to for our body to be receptive to such sort of like transmissions. So the intense is kind of not uh, is not very easy to do. But what we can do is the mild and medium, and these are sort of like what we are doing, which is like I try to meditate every day. I try to maybe spend some time in retreat where I get some 2 or 3 days or maybe a week long sessions, and that's sort of like this energy that we're applying. And the success of the yogi depends on how much effort that they're putting in. And some people, you look at somebody and be like, wow, this person only did this for a year and now they're like already there, like, and we can't say how much energy that they have already put so far, because this thing happens over lifetimes, and they may have done something in the previous life. So there's examples of Ramana Maharishi, for example. He was a sage back in the southern part of India, and he got enlightenment when he was 16. Like that's very lucky, but then also it doesn't explain, like there's no explanation of like how can it happen if you're only born for 16 years, and if you start counting from zero, it doesn't make sense that he gets enlightened at 16. So when he came out of it, he has said things like, yes, I have been a yogi in many lives of my past. And and like I think at some point in this we talked about how you may remember past lives. Some people do, and then they realize that yes, there were yogis, and they had done these gone through these experiences and all of that. So all we can do is put in energy in the now, and hope for the best. And I have heard and I have seen that things happen fairly quickly too, if we are sincere and earnest and consistent in the work. So try. So all we can do is try to be fully involved in the practice, and whatever happens happens. But we can just keep trying. That's all we can do. And the outcome is left to the divine. Any thoughts about this? Okay, so let's do 24. Ishvara pranidhanadva. So or by devotion to Ishvara. So this is interesting. So now we're given this word called Ishvara, which is the word that that the yogis use to describe God. And so the first word here is or. So it's basically an alternative to doing the work, right? So we can try to meditate for long hours. We can try to like control our mind, and we can do all of that. That's one way to do it. or the other way is by devotion. And devotion has some other prerequisites that are very different from the prerequisites that we saw with, like, which was faith and energy and all of that. So for devotion, the only prerequisite is complete surrender. And unfortunately, with the education system that we get, it's very hard to do that in this world. We cannot surrender because our intellectual mind will always doubt. And doubt is the opposite of surrender. So if we have a very intellectual mind, unfortunately, devotion does not work. And so it's very rare for people to be devoted in this world. So because devotion is basically saying, I don't care about my own mind at all. I'm not going to give my desire or my doubt or my thing any attention. And I will go with what this other person or the divine in the end has to do for me. So, like, I don't care about my safety. I don't care about my own success. I don't care about my own failures. I don't care about anything. My ego doesn't exist. My ego is essentially merging with the infinite. And this is a hard thing to do in this world. It's quite possible. It may be that, some of you may just develop a devotional nature, and we can develop this too, but it also it requires some divine surrendering, and it's not the simplest thing to do. So most of us try to do the other path, which is the path of practice. Any thoughts about this?
So, or by devotion to Ishvara is something like the Bhakti Yoga, what Krishna described in the Gita.
Correct. So, like,
Cool.
praying and letting go. And it's not just so much about praying, I guess, but it's more like in my moment-to-moment experience, I'm in perpetual acceptance of everything, which is like I don't have an ego of my own, and I don't have my own way that I want life to be. I'm just being, moved around by the Lord or by God.
Sure.
Yeah, it's the same sort of idea of Bhakti Yogi. Yes, you're right. So I think so let's do the next one. Klesha karma vipakasha yaira parara mrishtaha purusha vishesha ishvaraha. So Ishvara, the supreme ruler, is a special Purusha, untouched by misery, actions, their results, and desires. So here, the Purusha is essentially the word we use in the yogic philosophy. This is Sankhya philosophy to describe the self, which is like the inner, the I that we are. The word we use is Purusha, and Ishvara is the universal I. So just like how I have a physical body, I have a mind, I have my own desires, which are encompassed in this physical structure. The universe has its, so there's this sort of micro and macro relationship to it. So from a micro perspective, this is my body, and from the macro perspective, it's the entire universe. So the universe has its own physical body, which is the entire universe, which consists of all humans and animals and plants and everything, right? All the other planets and all the solar systems, all of it, all of the physical stuff. But within that physical universe, there's also a mental universe, which is the minds and the desires and the thoughts of all the animals and all the humans and all the other aliens which are in the other planets, all of them together. So there's this micro and macro relationship to it. So just like the I in me is untouched by all of my actions, right? Like the I am doesn't change. What changes is the mind. When the mind gets happy, the mind gets unhappy. the mind feels special, the mind doesn't feel special. All of those things are characteristics of the mind. Similarly, the body gets, sick, the body feels healthy, the body gets old, the body is young. All of those are characteristics of the body. But the I am is untouched. So even when misery comes in, uh, the I am is noticing misery is appearing, and it changes the mind, because the mind now becomes all sad and sulky, but the I am has not changed at all. Similarly, actions are, conducted by the body. So the body is moving, the body is eating, the body is pooping. All of those things are attributes of the body. But the I am is always noticing even that. So the I am is always untouched, both by the effects of all my actions, as well as the causes, which is the desires. So both cause and effect do not touch the body. Both the mind, they do not touch the I. They only touch the mind, which is and the body. So, uh, so similarly, just like there's a micro I, there is a macro I, which is the Ishvara, and that is also the same, which is untouched. All it does is it watches the universe change. New planets are created, new planets are, old planets are destroyed, stars come up and stars are like collapse. All of those things are happening. But there is this I amness which is happening even there, which is witnessing the entire universe. Um, and so that's what Ishvara is. So when we are devotion, when we are doing devotion, this is what God really is, which is this universal witness, which is just watching the entire creation and entire manifestation of this universe happen moment to moment. And it's changing and it's happening and it's morphing. So when we are devoted to this thing, not like, we can have a personal God and, pray to it and all of that. But the real governor of this universe, or the supreme ruler, is uh, this Ishvara, which is this witness of this universe. Uh, I don't want to get too caught up into this. This is just, touching into it, but we're not going to be focusing so much on this. But this is just to get you a general idea that um, there is this power, uh, or this lord, or this queen that exists, which is governing our entire universe. Any thoughts about this?
Question for me.
Yes.
So I understand the awareness aspect of Ishvara, but there is also the doing aspect, right? If it's a ruler or making all these things happen. So is that understanding correct? That there is a doing component to Ishvara?
So very easy to understand this if you look at your own experience. So you, as a human or as this body, are doing things, right? You are right now sitting on a chair. Maybe an hour later you're going to eat some food. So you're driven to do a bunch of things. So let me ask you a question: are you doing it, or is the body doing it?
This is still something I don't understand fully. Is it really the self doing it, or self is observing what the body does because it has these urges?
So you tell me, what is your experience?
It's not the self.
Okay. So if it's not, so I think that is true too. In my experience, the self is just watching, and the body, and it sees the body moving, and it sees the body, doing whatever it's doing. An easy way to understand this is that we get confused when it's our own body. But when you look at something else, and if we see a bird moving, do we say that I am watching the bird move? Or do we say, um, we our experience is that the bird is moving, but actually what is happening is that I am watching the bird move, right? So we have this clear separation that I'm not the bird, and the bird is something which is separate from me, and it's doing its own thing and it's moving. So I have no uh, role to play in its moving, right? That's very clear to me. But the moment I look at something in my own body, it gets a little confusing because the body is so much closer to me than the bird, right? It's very clear to me that I have no role in making the bird move. I have no role in making the tree grow. I have no role in like causing another human to do anything. But my own body, I get a little confused. Why? Because it's so much more closer than the bird. And it's so much, it feels like my own, whereas the bird doesn't feel like me, right? That's the only difference. Like the body feels me, I am the body, but I don't ever think that I am the bird. If I do, people are probably going to think I'm crazy, right? Um, so that's the only difference. But in terms of the mechanics, it's exactly the same, which is I am seeing the body and I'm seeing the bird. It's just that I see the body a lot more than I see the bird. Right? But sometimes I don't see the body too. When do I not see the body? When I'm in deep sleep, when I'm in a dream state, or even sometimes when I'm so lost in some activity, I forget that I'm a body. Right? Only when I come out of like let's say I was reading a book and I was so lost in reading the book, I completely forgot I was a human. And then suddenly somebody calls my name and I look out and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm sitting on my couch, right? Like we also have the experience where we can forget that we are the body. So the body is like a moment to moment experience where it's coming up. The body is here. I have to remember, oh yes, I'm the body because I see it. But if I don't see it, I don't think I'm a body. So even the body is like an event that is being sort of created moment to moment to moment to moment. So if that is true, then I cannot be something that is only momentary, right? Because I know that I am all the time. I have to be something that is true all the time. Because if I don't see the body in one place, but if I see the body later, it means that I have negated the body in my own experience. So I have to be something that is not the body. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Another one, a quick one, another one. You mentioned, and this is just if you have a yes or no answer. I know it's not the focus of, but you mentioned and all other beings on other planets. So do Vedas imply that there are other living creatures elsewhere in the universe?
I don't know. I don't think they explicitly say that, but that is just something that I think they probably are, just because the universe is so big, and we possibly can't be the only. Like I would say, like there is a lot of symmetry in this universe, right? Like there are laws and rules that govern this universe. Earth cannot be a special place, right? Like it just so happens that there's life here. I have a feeling that the same sort of laws that create life here is probably creating life in some other planets.
Right. Good, thank you. And also you could say that Ishvara gave us body and mind to kind of function and operate. He or she could also give some other existence to some other beings that don't include mind and body, but some other two things we are not even aware of.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of creatures on this planet which don't have a mind, right? Like if you look at trees, they have a body, but their mind is very limited, right? Like they cannot make decisions, or like they can't think. So everybody has a different body, or many creatures have different sort of what is the word? And a different evolutionary stage of the body. And at least on this planet, humans are the most evolved body, where they have a mind and a very evolved mind and an evolved body, where we know that we are aware. I think we are one of the only species on this planet which can recognize that we are aware. Everybody else is just caught up with whatever they're seeing. Right? We are the only ones which are beings. That's why we are called a being. We are a human being. Right? Every other animal is not a being. They are just animals, which is they just do whatever is their programming. But we can reprogram ourselves. That's the difference between humans and every other animal. So which is why they say it's a huge gift to be born as a human, because only a human being can get out of being being a human. Every other animal is sort of limited by the, you know, the or surface level desires that they have, which is food, shelter, and reproduction. Right? Humans are the only ones which can go beyond, and there's no end to where we can sort of go. Anyways, that's going on a little bit of a tangent, but yes, I personally think there are other life in other planets. Any other thoughts? Move on to the next one otherwise. All right. Tatra nirati shayam sarvagyatya bijam. In him becomes infinite that all knowingness, which in others is only a germ. So here, him is not, it's not indicating any sex or anything. It just so happens that Sanskrit is a language which is actually, it is a gender-specific language. So certain words have a certain gender, and some words are neuter. It just so happens that the word that they use has a male gender. So they have this idea in Sanskrit, which is that everything in this world has a feminine aspect and a masculine aspect to it. And it just so happens that a human being, also just a human being itself, has a feminine and masculine aspect to them. Each human being, irrespective of whether they're man or woman. And based on how much of the physical equation is sort of the balance is in whichever direction, it ends up that we have a human body which is either male or female. Same thing with the mind. Our mind can have a masculine and feminine nature as well, which is why, we always have to be balanced, which is we want to balance both our masculine and feminine nature. And that's what we try to do with yoga too, which is, devotion kind of opens up our feminine aspect of it, whereas like a lot of like the meditation and all of that sort of opens up our masculine nature. So we want to do both, and we want to be balanced. So here, coming back to this sutra, so in him becomes infinite that all knowingness, which is others, is only a germ. So it's basically saying that, we have this light in us which allows us to know things, right? We are conscious beings which illumine things in our experience, and that's the way we learn things, right? If I look at a cup and I say, wow, this cup is very beautiful, and it's blue or whatever, right? Like this awareness is causing me to know this. So just like there's something within me that allows me to like know things, in Ishvara, which is the infinite self, there is an infinite all-knowingness, right? So if there's a knowingness within me that is which is illuminating all the limited things which is in my perception, from a micro standpoint, from a macro standpoint, there has to be an infinite all-knowingness, which is like everything is being illuminated at all the time, right? Because all the physical objects are being illumined to that infinite being. So this is kind of just a technical concept, but it's basically just describing that, there is a greater sort of force and a greater power than our limited mind that we have, which is all knowing. So the physical mind of the infinite has all the thoughts and all the emotions. So it has everything. So like, there's something which is infinitely greater than our own limited mind, which is like, which has only our own thoughts and our own emotions and our own feelings. We don't want to get too caught up in this, but this is just giving a sense of what this Ishvara is. Any thoughts about this?
Hey, Puneet, just the word germ, is it what it stands for, or is there another meaning to this germ, the very last word?
That's a good question. So I guess the word they've used here is bijam, which is interesting. It actually means seed, but I guess maybe the germ was a bad English translation. But I guess the idea is that a seed can sort of flower, can sort of grow as well. So like our knowingness can sort of be increased, where we can start to sort of know a lot more things. But as we tap into, like, as our mind gets quieter and quieter, there comes we get a sense of like, we kind of tap into like Jim frames it as like we tap into the cloud. And that starts to happen where we start to like get ideas where we never thought we could have gotten an idea of ourselves. So that's where we are sort of growing this sense of knowingness, where we're starting to know more things. So we can sort of like water this and develop this, right? Because it's like a seed. And I guess a germ you could potentially grow to. Maybe it's a bad translation.
No,
Can I add, Puneet, like biologically, germ is used for a gamete, or germ, something that can potentially germinate. So maybe it's not so it's not the microorganism germ that we're talking about, but germ here refers to a gamete or something that has a potential to germinate.
Awesome.
Great. That's great.
Okay.
Is Dr. Govind a medical doctor or some other doctor?
Oh yes, I'm a medical doctor. I'm
So we
a
have two
dermatologist.
medical doctors on the phone tonight.
Nice.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
That totally makes sense.
I agree with him also.
Cool. Wonderful. All right. Any other thoughts about this one? Okay, let's do the next one. Sapurvesham api guruhu kalinan vachedat. He is the teacher of even the ancient teachers, being not limited by time. So he here, we are still referring to Ishvara, and we're talking about, who was the first teacher, right? Like we talk about like all these like realized beings that have come into this world, but then the question is like, who was the teacher of that teacher, right? Like it's always like, where do we keep trailing this teacher-student relationship? Like who was the first teacher, right? It's like the holy chicken and egg problem that we have. And the answer to that is that this infinite has everything, and like the source of all the questions and the source of all the doubts and the source of all the answers are all in this infinite. So from this infinite comes a teacher, and from the infinite comes the student too. And the infinite creates the student, and the infinite creates the teacher as well. So the first teacher who came got the answers from the self, which is, the self from within, probably gave them the answers. And they became a source of, transmission. And this is happening constantly, where like, some new teachers are coming into this world. They are sort of like, transmitting knowledge to more people, and then those people become students, and like they become eventually teachers, whatever, right? Like there's this sort of cycle. But then what this is saying that, this is the true teacher, or the first teacher is this, and it's omnipresent. It's not limited by time, because even time is something that's created after the infinite, right? So this teacher has been existed for forever. And in Vedanta, for example, we talk about what is the real guru or the real teacher, and the real teacher is the self. And this is alluding to the same fact, that the self is actually the real teacher. And from the self comes all the physical, human beings who are teachers and all of that. Does that make sense? Any thoughts about this? All right. Next one, 27. Tasya vachakaha pranavaha. So 27, his manifesting word is Om. All right, so this is a very interesting statement. So if you look at the word Om, it's actually not Om, it's actually A, U, and Ma. It consists of 3 syllables which are audible, and then the 4th syllable is silence. So it's actually A, U, Ma, and silence. So there's 4 parts to it. And why are these 3 things chosen? It's not like a randomly chosen 3 letters. They are very sort of experientially chosen. So if we look at our own mouths and our own voices, these three sounds, a, u, and ma, are the base sounds of all the sounds that the human mouth can produce. And you can test this by, opening your mouth. So if you open our mouth and just do ah, and if we don't like touch our tongue to any part of our mouth, the sound that comes out is an ah. Ah. And as you kind of close your mouth, the sound goes from ah, and if we keep making the same sound, automatically the sound becomes oo. So ow. So that's the second sound. And then we completely close it and we still keep making the sound, we get the m sound. So so this isn't some random words that was chosen. This is a very direct experience, which is aum, aum, aum. And this is, and if you even notice the place of where these sounds come from. So if we kind of get a little bit sensitive, and if we make the ah sound, you'll notice that the sound is actually coming from the base of our body. So like near the stomach. So the ah sound is like at the bottom here, ah, and you can kind of feel like your stomach is vibrating when you make that sound. And you can play with this. And then if you make the ooh sound, it kind of moves up from the stomach area to the chest area. So the ooh is happening in the chest. And finally, the ma sound, it kind of moves up even further. So it moves to the head. So the and you can kind of feel your entire head vibrating when you make the sound. And then the last one is silence. And silence is actually very important too, because in the silence, the I am is revealed. So a, u, and ma are essentially sounds that are physical, right? Like every sound is external, and it's a vibration. And these vibrations, so the a is the grossest vibration, the u is slightly more subtle, and the is the subtler, and the subtlest of it all is silence, right? That's the basis of all the other sounds. So it's very sort of like practically crafted with these starting from a to u and ma and then silence. So we are going from the grossest and we're going to the subtlest. And so this is not only like just random sounds, they all have a lot of meaning too. And they are also experientially true, which is like, they're moving our attention from bottom to the top and away from our head. So like from a chakra standpoint and from an energetic standpoint, it's essentially moving our energies from the bottom all the way to the top and out of the head. So that's why, you'll hear a lot of Om chanting, both in Hinduism and in Buddhism and in Jainism and all these sort of, cultures that came out of the subcontinent in India. But also it's interesting that even in the West, in Christianity, the word that they use is amen, which is very similar to aum. And they all have a similar sort of basis to it. Even in the Islamic religion, the word is amin. So like, these are like raw sounds that, I guess they say that when, we go into the Samadhi state, we actually hear this raw sound because this entire world is a vibration and we can hear it. So this is getting into a little bit of a woo-woo category, but the idea is that, uma is not random, specifically chosen, and they sort of are moving from the subtlest, from the grossest to the subtlest, and eventually to silence, which is the basis of sound itself. So without silence, there would be no sound. Cool. And so that's the word Om. And then word, other than that, so I think we go to the next one. So let's do the next one. Sajja.
Can I
Do you
just
have a
ask
question,
a
Gaurav?
question? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, they have linked the word Om to the Supreme Being. Any particular way this link has been created, or
I
it's
don't
just
think they have linked the word Om with the Supreme Being. Oh, you can think of it as it is a symbol or it is a representation of this universe. Because with these three sounds, you can create all other sounds. So you can think of it as like, if you have primary colors, three primary colors are enough to create all the colors in this universe, right?
Yeah.
Same idea is that A, Uma are basic sounds. And if you look at, science is also telling us that everything in the end is just a vibration. And if sounds are vibrations, with three base sounds, you can create everything else. So that's kind of the idea, that his manifesting word is Om. So manifesting is that which is physical, right? So anything that is physical, the base is Om. It can all be
Okay.
sort of brought down to the word Om. But the self has no sound. The self is, qualityless. So like the I am is qualityless. Everything that has a quality is an object, right? Every object has a quality. So the sound has a quality. So the for example, is more gross than because of the vibrational frequency or whatever, however you want to measure that. But that's the quality of the sound, not the quality of the self. Self is without quality. It's just observing. It's just noticing, uh, and and it is qualityless. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Hey, Puneet, another quick one. I guess in English, somebody decided to spell it with two letters, O and M, not with the three letters like you were saying. I'm curious, how is it spelled in other languages, maybe in Sanskrit? Is it one character or is it three characters?
So in Sanskrit,
I know the sign.
Yeah, so in Sanskrit, we actually have this rule called sandhi, which means that when there's two vowels, they can join to become a different sound. So A plus U in Sanskrit become an O, because that's just like one of the rules of the language. Like I think German has the same rule where like if two words are joined to become a new word, like there's some rules on how you join and how the sound sort of changes um, from one word to another. So this is essentially what's happening is a grammatical change to the word auma. So om is still a uma. It's just that a plus u becomes an o in Sanskrit. So that's the confusing part of it.
Mm-hmm. And then I've seen like a symbol that represents Om, which is really a one character. Yes. What is that? Is that character for Om and it's pronounced as Om, or is just a character?
So it's like all the three things which have been, so there's three letters, right? U, and Ma. So all three of them have been combined to create this special character called Om. It doesn't ordinarily happen in Sanskrit where like you create special things for a word, but only Om has been chosen because it is the manifesting word of Ishvara. So it's a very important word. And so it's been created as a physical symbol that people
can I add something, Puneet? The symbol also has, so if you look at the Sanskrit or the Devanagari script for a, the letter a and the letter u and the character, so om is nothing but the manifestation of all the three words. So you have the three, which is a part of the and the u, and you have the loop, which is the part of the u, and the crescent kind of thing is the part of the ma. So that's the manifestation of all three words.
Right. But
syllables.
I guess I wanted to just add that that's the only, I guess, word. Like if you were to write this, like write any other word, you wouldn't combine it like that. You would write it separately. And the reason was like they wanted to create a symbol, right? Like so it's not just like a sound; it's also a visual symbol. So it's in our minds, and symbols are powerful because when you look at a symbol, you think of the meaning, right? Which is why like every logo or whatever, right? Like every endeavor you also try to create like represented it in a visual form. Cool. So does anyone have any other thoughts about Om? Okay, so let's do another one. Tat japa tadartham bhavanam. So the repetition of this Om and meditating on its meaning is the way. So one of the ways to quieten the mind is to repeat a mantra. And a mantra is something that is sort of a sacred syllable. And something is sacred because, there's a lot of meaning attached to the word or whatever you're repeating. And because it has a lot of meaning, when you think of the word, automatically you think about the implications, and it puts the mind in a place which is sort of more receptive or more prepared for like deeper levels of meditation. Which is why like Om is a great sort of mantra for it, because if you think of Om, and immediately you think of like the entire universe and how it's, entire universe is just vibrations. It's not me. I am a witness of it all. Like all of those things are sort of implied with just the word Om. And then, while we are chanting it, we can sort of like also get a sense of the word, see how it feels in our body, and the work that it's doing, and how, it's like I was saying that, it's positioned in different parts of each letter is like vibrating a different part of the body. All of that is happening, and this becomes a direct experience, and it's not just in theory, right? Like we are directly experiencing it. We are coming up with our own wisdom. All of that is happening, and that becomes very powerful because we now have proof of its efficacy, where we're starting to see it actually manifest in our own experience. So that's why like this is very powerful. And I also wanted to eventually talk about like how Om, the more philosophical meaning of Om as well, which is like, it represents the three states of experience, and then the silence is like the fourth state of experience. So maybe we can talk about that in the next class, but the idea is that we can use these sort of powerful mantras to calm our minds, and the only reason we want to use them is because our attention is no longer on the stuff that the mind is throwing up, when it's on the sounds and on the vibrations of the sounds. And once we start to get a little bit more quieter, we can even drop the mantra, and then we can come to the I am thought. So we have all these different tools, and we want to apply all these different tools based on where we are, what our current state is. If the mind is extremely loud and very talkative, we may want to use this mantra of this chanting to kind of bring our attention back, because the entire body starts vibrating and our attention comes to the body. We kind of settle into the now. So great. This is a great tool. Try it out as well. In moments when you feel like your mind is very active and you want to kind of quiet it down, maybe you don't even have to say it out loud. You can even say it in your mind. If you're like in a bus or a train, very unlikely you would be in a bus now, but when you're in a bus in the future and you don't want to like be screaming Om in the bus, you can do this in the mind too. And that has the same effect, because the mind is creating those vibrations. They're just slightly subtler. So that's the idea of this verse. This is a great tool as well. Any thoughts about this? Cool. So I think we are at time. So I want to stop here. So we're pretty much almost 60% of the first chapter. So I think we're doing pretty well. We have 2 more classes before we end this. I'm hoping that we can finish the chapter. I think there's about 50 in the first chapter. So that'll give us like a good sort of overview of a couple of Raja Yoga practices, and allow us to like take it out in the world and continue to build on those tools. I wanted to end this class with a chant. I know we haven't been chanting at all this class, so I thought we could do a chant here. And this is a chant from Bhaja Govindam. It's a hymn written by Adi Shankara, who comes from the Vedanta world. He was born sometime in the year 8800 CE, or maybe 780 CE, I forget. It's kind of a little blurry. And this is like a chant that he sort of wrote when he was, I think, 31 or something, and written in Sanskrit, obviously. Is a 4-line chant, and the way to do it is that I can chant the first one, and then the first line, and then we can do it together. So that way, you'll get a chance to say it as well. And if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine as well. So let's try it. Yogarato va bhogarato va yogarato va bhogarato va sangarato va sangavihina sangarato va sangavihina yasya brahmani ramate cittam yasya brahmani ramate cittam nandati nandati nandatyeva nandati nandati nandatyeva nandati nandati nandatyeva. So the meaning of this is the entire teaching and the goal and the purpose of yoga, which is let one revel in yoga, or let one revel in bhoga. And bhoga here is the word we use to describe just being a worldly person and just consuming things and trying to fulfill as many desires as I can. So it doesn't matter if you want to be in yoga or we want to do bhoga, or if you want to seek enjoyment in company or in solitude. But she whose mind revels in the self, she enjoys, indeed only she enjoys. So only that person who can tune up the mind and revel in the self, that's the only person who can really enjoy this world. So this is kind of like the reason why we do yoga, which is to really enjoy this world. And I hope this is a reality for us all, and we get to revel in the self. Cool. So we have about like 20 minutes for questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions. But that's all for the class today.
I have a question, but I don't know. It was when we were doing one of the slides, and you were talking about the bird flying.
Mm-hmm.
So there are no objects. There's just watching, right? Like have this sense of vision, right? Like I'm seeing, like just like the traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no traffic out there, but I'm just hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's hearing, smelling, tasting, sensing, and that's all happening inside. There's nothing outside. So, but there's only the knowing of what is happening. Is that, but because what you were saying, like if I see the bird flying, I don't know how you say it, but it was related to I don't know. I just for some reason I got a little bit sidetracked. Like, wait, So in my meditation, when I'm just, just doing I am, I know there's a lot of all the other mind stuff. And so at one point, even what you were saying was just like, I was just in my sitting here, I was just saying, I am,